represent Pamela Equities Corporation, which is the applicant for this project. The application is for a 14-lot cluster subdivision on 119 acres of land off of Bear Mountain Road. The property is located in the RA80 zone. The proposal is to dedicate 47 plus acres of open space, and the significance of that particular location of the open space is that abuts the Bear Mountain Preserve, which is property owned by the city of Danbury. This particular proposal, the only wetlands that were proposed to be altered consist of a small 654 square foot pocket of wetland soils, non-functional wetland soils on lot 1 of the proposal. There will be no impact to the water courses. Here with me tonight is Steve Sullivan, professional engineer with CCA. He's the project engineer. James Cowan of Environmental Planning Services. He's a registered soil scientist, a professional wetland scientist, and a landscape designer. And Ted Von Rosenvinge, who's also a professional engineer with Geodesign Inc. And Ted will discuss the geology of the site, particularly pertaining to the road and driveway improvements and the handling of any potential VON, capital ROS, ENVINGE. It's a mouthful.
Just a favor too, again, but also for the film too, because we are being filmed tonight. Speak more into the microphone. I appreciate it. Thank you.
We have also engaged the well-known herpetologist Michael Clemens to do a site survey and review concerning the potential presence of the slimy salamander, which is an upland species, but nevertheless is considered a threatened species. He has not completed that site work as of yet. We hope to have it done by your next meeting and a presentation for you that night. So I would hope that we could keep the hearing open, which I'm sure we could. So with that, I'll introduce Steve Sullivan. Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, Steve Sullivan, professional engineer licensed in the state of Connecticut with CCA LLC. I'm going to take the microphone and talk a little bit about it. I'm going to go through a site description and a development description and some details about utilities. Property again is 119 acres, located on the east side of Bear Mountain Road. It is approximately 1060 feet east of Buckskin Heights Drive. Property has frontage on Candlewood Lake. If you're looking at the map, Candlewood Lake is at the bottom of the map here, and Bear Mountain Road is the top of the map. There are existing, the property butts New Fairfield Town Line, which is to the north, on the right side of the map. 1.3 acres of the parcel of the 119 acres is in New Fairfield. There is no development or any in New Fairfield at all. There is a 2.1 acre narrow wetland corridor with a stream within its boundary. That's this yellow area through here. It crosses an existing private driveway through a pipe culvert. The 654 square foot wetland is located on lot 1 in this area. The topography of the site is moderate to steep sloping. There is a ridge line located in this area where the runoff runs towards the Bear Mountain Road, and the remaining site runs towards Candlewood Lake. There are existing dwellings owned by others. There's a separate piece of properties along Candlewood Lake on the bottom of the page that have rights to pass and repass over this existing driveway. The project consists of a 14-lot cluster residential subdivision. The lot areas range from 1.2 acres to 21.8 acres. There's a total of 47.5 acres of proposed open space. 47.2 acres of the open space is adjacent to the City of Danbury Bear Mountain Preserve, located in the southern part of the property. There's a small .3 acres of open space adjacent to the proposed road on the northern part of the property. Each property will have its own individual septic system and individual well designed to conform to the state public health code. The drainage system, again, as I mentioned earlier, there is a ridge line that kind of divides where the water runoff, again, to Bear Mountain Road into Kennewood Lake. The drainage system towards Bear Mountain Road will consist of catch basins and culverts to in the proposed city road that will discharge or get conveyed into a soil concentrator or hydrodynamic separator. The vortex unit is what we're proposing to use on this project. From there, it will get conveyed into a underground gallery system to provide a detention system for your peak flows, and then from there discharge into the existing drainage system on Bear Mountain Road. The drainage system proposed towards Kennewood Lake, again, it starts with the road drainage with catch basins and culverts. That gets conveyed to the cul-de-sac and then gets conveyed through a proposed common driveway. It'll get conveyed into another vortex system for treatment of the stormwater, and then discharged into a wet pond slash detention basin. Wet pond function is for water quality, and then there's a detention function to provide zero increase of runoff. The road is, we have one primary road that's 870 feet, ends in a cul-de-sac. Then we have a spur off of that that's about 580 feet that also ends in a cul-de-sac. There's two common driveways. Common driveway in the north part of the property serves two lots. That would be lot 12 and 13. Common driveway on the south side serves lots 7 and 6. And all the other lots have individual driveways to them. Also, as part of the development, each lot, on several lots we have shown rain gardens for roof drainage, roof runoff to recharge through vegetated rain gardens. There's details in the in the plans that show the sizes and the landscaping that's going to be proposed in the rain gardens. We've also, as part of our alternatives analysis, we looked at, we actually almost fully designed a conventional layout subdivision. Major difference, same number of lots, the major difference was this common driveway to the south that we show in our proposed, our current plans was another spur, another city road, which then fed, there was 1, 2, 3, 4 lots off of that. After consulting with our environmental team, we felt that, we could achieve less grading, less earthwork, less tree clearing with a cluster subdivision. And in our package, we have an analysis, and I'll refer you to the chart. I created a chart with some different categories that I felt were important for the EIC review, and it compares conventional subdivision with cluster subdivision. The first one is regulated area disturbance. There's about 8,400 square feet less regulated area disturbance with the cluster subdivision. Total impervious area with all the proposed houses, driveways, and roadways. The conventional layout was 4.1 acres. There's 3.45 acres with the cluster subdivision layout. Wetland disturbance, the conventional layout had a small amount, 869 square feet, because this narrow wetland that I mentioned earlier, with the proposed wider roadway, there was a little tip of that wetland that would have been disturbed. With the cluster layout, again, we have the 654 square feet of wetlands being disturbed or filled in that case, which our environmental consultant will discuss after me. Also, we calculated the total project disturbance, basically everything, all the construction limit lines. And we had a 20.7 acre project disturbance with the conventional layout and 16.7 acres with the cluster layout. Also, open space with the conventional layout, we had 28.4 acres, and with the cluster layout, there was 47.5 acres of proposed open space. We are in receipt of Kendall Lake Authority's review, and we're in the process, I'm already in the process of addressing some of those comments. And I'm not sure if the commission's been out to the site yet, individually or in a group.
No, we still have to plan a site walk, so that's something we'll discuss later.
I think I'm going to hand it off to Jim Cowan, our environmental consultant, and then, again, I'll be here for questions and clarifications.
Would you prefer to work from the podium, or?
I think so. I'll just sign it.
Okay.
Or do we?
Do the applicant, yeah, if you could, please.
Good evening. My name is James Cowan. I work with Environmental Planning Services. I'm a registered soil scientist, professional wetland scientist, and landscape designer. Our firm was retained to delineate the wetlands, assess the wetland functions and values, conduct a wildlife inventory and impact assessment, and guide the development process or in the planning process of the ultimate site plan. And I think it's easier to speak from the drawing, so I'll stand over here. Essentially, the entire site is wooded, upland woods and wooded swamp are the two habitat types. The upland soils are all glacial till. The wetlands, we identified wetland 1 as this very small pocket, is called an aquant because it's an excavation. And when you go out to the on the site walk, there's actually a fairly large area that was excavated, I believe, for gravel or sand, and there's a berm around this large excavation, and there's a very small portion within it that we identified as an aquant. And there's a minimal amount of groundwater discharge that we identified in seasonal high groundwater in March. But even at that time, it was minimal. So it's not an area that ponds. It's not at all obvious as a wetland. The vegetation is minimal, primarily poison ivy, sparse poison ivy, and leaf litter. The canopy is all in the adjacent upland, and so there's very minimal habitat or wetland function associated with that, but I'll come back to that in just a second. The major wetlands system is what we would call a stream valley that drains towards Candlewood Lake and, in fact, into Candlewood Lake. And that is a wooded swamp. It's in the lower portion, there's a perennial stream associated. In the upper area, much of it is a boulder field, wooded with ferns, shrub layer of primarily spicebush, and a few scattered invasive species. In terms of the functions and values, I presume that you have our report dated September 10th. And we do have a chart in there that does a comparison of the functions and values, and I'll just draw your attention to that. As you are probably, and that's on page 6, as you're probably aware, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has identified wetland functions and values that they consider primary, and they're well accepted in the scientific community as categories for looking at wetlands, and there are 13 different functions and values that we look at and assess and you'll find in the appendix a detailed narrative of how we assess the functions and values of both. But there's a table 3 of the functions and values, and I'll just go through that briefly. For wetland 1, which is the small isolated pocket, we don't usually say none, we say low, but you could say minimal. There is a minimal function. I would say the primary function of it is groundwater discharge, and as we have observed that's minimal. I didn't even see any flow paths out of it. As it seeps across the wetland into the excavation, the larger excavated area, it no doubt just infiltrates back into the ground. As Steve pointed out, it's on the west side of the ridge line, so it does not drain into Candlewood Lake. It really doesn't drain anywhere except within that isolated excavation itself, and just infiltrates back into the ground. As such, there was no depression that could really function for floodwater storage. No sediment or retention value, and because there was so little vegetation, there really isn't much of a habitat for wildlife. And for good wildlife habitat, we look for areas that seasonally pond or have significant seepage, and we didn't find any significant wetland wildlife habitat there. So essentially, you could view, except that it was excavated close to the groundwater, its essential function is similar to any wooded site. It's got a canopy and marginal herbaceous vegetation, and actually no shrub layer within it. By comparison, wetland 2 has some pretty high values. It has significant groundwater discharge. We identified groundwater seeps at a couple of different locations. And as this goes down the slope, the seepage concentrates into a perennial stream. So, this is a significant resource, a stream valley. It has production export is moderate, and production export has to do with a wetland producing something. And in this case, what it does is produce food for wildlife. A spice bush produces berries that birds use. There's ferns, there's sedges, there's a variety of vegetation that offer food sources for wetland wildlife. As such, it has what we consider moderate values for production export. It's not really high because there are a lot of boulders, and if you can, if you're from the private driveway, you can look right across the wetland and see that the vegetation is good tree canopy, low to moderate shrub layer, and patches of ferns and so forth in between this boulder field through which the wetland flows. We would consider it also unique in the fact that it is this stream valley that flows into Candlewood Lake. It's a significant resource, and I would also list it as high for the visual or aesthetic quality. It's a nice looking wetland. You can see it. It's accessible from the private drive. You can look up it from the crossing point. You can look up the wetland. You can look down, and as you go further down towards the lake, there are nice views across the wetland. So it does have scenic value as a stream valley. So we would consider wetland 2 a high-functioning wetland, and wetland 1 minimal is a generous assessment. As Steve has said, we were involved early on, or actually the design process went a couple of years with a conventional design. And when we came on board, in terms of assessing it, we really said that we felt that the cluster development was a better approach and more conserving of the landscape and more environmentally friendly. And so by shifting the gears and engineering and a lot more design work, we've worked closely with CCA to come up with the present design, which we feel is environmentally better. Steve has identified in that table the list of changes by going to a cluster subdivision. By doing that and reducing the number of units, we feel that that's probably the most significant mitigation, is actually good design. And so by going with the cluster subdivision and good design, we believe that that's the best mitigation. And if you look in our recommendation section, and I know I'm skipping around, which is on page 10, all of our recommendations were essentially accomplished by shifting to a cluster subdivision. And so we consider that the most significant mitigation that could be done. And I'll just say a little bit about the stormwater, since that's one of my specialties, planting plans and detention basin design. And are we on another sheet on that, Steve?
This planting plan we devised after our initial submission, so the commission has not received this yet. This is going to be part of the next revised package. But we just want you to know it's done, and Jim's just going to touch on it.
So I'm sorry, you said we do not have the plans in hand right now?
This planting plan is not.
Then I would say wait till next week. I wouldn't even touch it.
Shall we wait then?
I would
Okay.
definitely wait till next week.
Okay.
We have a copy in our hands that we can make notes and
Okay.
review. I would
Okay.
definitely wait till next week.
I'll just simply say that we have reviewed the stormwater plans and have had input to maximize the treatment in terms of how the basins are designed, and we will describe that in detail when you have the plans before you. In terms of mitigation, and the design is the primary mitigation that we offer. In addition to that, additional mitigation that we would propose is that, and again, I think we need to go to a different drawing that shows the proposed private drive. Okay.
Again, is this a map that we have for our review? We have this, okay.
Okay, this is sheet S, overall site plan, sheet S1. There are several drainage pipes that pick up some of the drainage off the private drive at 3 different locations. We recommended extending those pipes closer to the wetland where it's relatively flat and have a splash pad in those areas to deal with any flows and minimize any erosion. For mitigation, we propose revegetating the minimal amount of disturbance to put those pipes in. We also propose some mitigation closest to the wetland. There is a proposed wall so that the private drive is separated and as far as possible from the wetland, and we propose to do some mitigation planting below that wall, again, any disturbance with footings and so forth, to stabilize that area. That's the closest area of regulated activity to the wetlands at that point. In addition to those mitigation measures, we would also propose removal of woody invasive species within wetland 2, the stream wetland, as mitigation for the filling of wetland 1. Again, it's a high quality resource. There are some invasive species. We think that we can maximize the ecological integrity of wetland 2 by removing those invasive species, which we believe would more than offset the filling of wetland 1, which has minimal functions.
Just back up a little bit. Are these mitigations clearly stated in the materials you gave us? And
We will provide those for next time.
I would appreciate it. I know sometimes it brings clouds. Our mission here is that if you clearly point these out bullet points, your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, that you're clearly stating is mitigation.
Right.
On
Now-
a sheet of paper or somewhere in,
Okay, and how would you prefer, would it in a simple narrative form?
a narrative form or somewhere in your report that you have these 7 or 8 bullet points showing that these
Okay,
mitigation points you just picked out.
okay, we'll provide an additional letter highlighting those mitigation measures. Okay.
Commissioners have any other questions at this time? Commissioner Mills?
Are all the wetlands flagged?
Yes?
Okay, let's, next, oh, absolutely, yes. No, basically, we're just taking a break to ask each of your representatives questions. It's probably easier to do it that way. You'll be
Thank
here
you.
next meeting too, correct? With
I'm not sure if it'll be me or one of my colleagues, but someone from our office will be here.
Perfect.
Okay?
How are we doing on the microphones? Good? All right, there we go. Just check.
For the record, my name is Ted von Rosenving. I am a geotechnical engineer employed as a principal and president of Geodesign Incorporated. We're located in Middlebury, Connecticut. Our firm is the largest Connecticut headquartered geotechnical firm, consulting firm in Connecticut. I have not been before this commission before. I have been in here for planning and zoning on multiple occasions. I've done many projects in the area over the years. Would you like a little profile of my
Of your
qualifications?
credentials, or-
Yes.
Sure.
I'm a geotechnical engineer, which is a civil engineer with advanced training in soil mechanics, rock mechanics, foundation engineering, earth structures, underground construction, geology, things of that nature. I have a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Northeastern and a master's degree from Massachusetts Institute of Technology with a geotechnical specialization. We were retained to provide some other qualifications. I have done a fair amount of work in this Candlewood Lake area. I did a work on the earthquake stability of the dams that retain the water up there. Of the dams that retain the water for Candlewood Lake for Northeast Utilities. I don't do a lot of work for Northeast Utilities, but I had a very recent project where I was hired as their blasting consultant for the Route 7 work up in Brookfield, where they have some transmission towers, a lot of blasting for Route 7 right next to it, and they hired me to represent their interests in terms of being a technical person that could understand the blasting. Enough on qualifications. I was retained just within the last several months, had an opportunity to walk the site on August 29th with Steve Sullivan of CCA, review the test pit data that they have, review the published geologic maps which exist for this quadrangle, both bedrock and the superficial maps. And I had a couple hour site visit out there. What I observed was consistent with the geologic mapping and the previous testimony by the soil scientist that spoke before me. It's glacial till over, there's a boulder field that you can see that's evident. There's also some bedrock outcrops, and I would say predominantly I observed bedrock outcrops over on the north end of the site in this vicinity here, but largely soil covered terrain, and these soils I would expect to be dense. only 10% of the approximately 70 test holes that they did, I saw with mention of hitting bedrock. And within those, it was on the order of 5 feet deep. So there's a good layer of soil there, but I anticipate bedrock will be encountered in the deeper excavations, and particularly where there's obvious bedrock outcrops, as I mentioned. To remove that, I anticipate the most efficient method will be blasting. I recognize blasting is often a concern for property owners and neighbors. There are perceived risks. And what I have done is outlined a program which normally we don't present until we get into the construction documents, but provided them with a specification. I believe it's appended to a letter that summarizes my review that you received earlier this week. But the specification basically outlines a program of rock removal by controlled blasting. It's the uncontrolled blasting that causes problems. Controlled blasting, in a nutshell, involves, number one, hiring a qualified blasting contractor. Number two, requiring the blasting contractor to submit a blasting plan so that we can look at it in advance and see that there are empirical formulas by which you can look at the charge size and project vibration and compare that vibration versus distance to published values that are widely adopted as acceptable. And then they would do a test blast and check those assumptions. And the projects we're involved with, that's the procedure we recommend, and that's the procedure we want to see. It's the safest way to proceed with blasting to keep vibrations normal. And there's nothing here that I see from a rock removal point of view that's unusual or not able to be done by conventional construction methods and local contractors. As far as earthwork is concerned, there will be some cuts, particularly along the driveway, which is on the south end of the site. They're proposing some retaining walls. That's feasible, normal way to treat that. And the larger cuts tend to be towards the north end of the site. I'd say in general, the cuts are to make the house lots are on the order of 5 to 10 feet. Some of the roadway cuts are up to 15, even 20 feet locally in some areas. And there are a few cuts that are on the order of 25 feet behind some of the residences at the north end of the site, kind of the abutting town end of the site. Normal cut slope treatment, 2-to-1 slopes should work there. Don't expect a lot of water bleeding out of these slopes, as it's kind of an uphill arrangement. That's all I have for right now.
Any questions, commissioners, of Ted?
Did you submit a blasting plan?
I've submitted the specification that we recommend our clients use and the client use on this one, so that down the road when they retain their blasting subcontractor, they can hand it to them and say, here's what we want. Here's what we've agreed upon. And you should have a copy of that. I think that was submitted.
Oh, okay. Any other commissioners at the present time? Thanks.
Thank you.
My partner forgot to announce me. My name is Paul Jaber. I'm attorney at law at Braxton, Danbury. I just want to, because I was involved in discussions with the open space, a significant amount of open space that's being proposed here. It's in this area. It's 47 acres, and it fronts all along Lake Candlewood. It's a steep piece of parcel, and it butts up on the east by Lake Candlewood during its entire piece, on the west by the city of Danbury, which is the Bear Mountain Reservation, south also by the city and I believe by the federal prison that's there. And on the north by those couple of lots that were talked about. That's the only piece that, of this 119 acres that butts to the lake. No, excuse me, lot 12 goes down to the lake. The other, just that portion of lot 12 and the rest of this. Well, I've been contacted by Bill Montgomery of the Danbury Land Trust, and Mr. Montgomery wants to put together a task force consisting of the mayor's office, the Conservation Commission, and a couple other commissions in town to decide what to do with that. There's interest by both the city as to how to deal with it and different agencies because of its location both on the lake and on Bear Mountain. So the open space, yeah, sorry. So while it's intended by us to be obviously open space, I'm not sure who's going to end up owning it or how it'll be dealt with because there are several people interested in how we deal with it, in addition to yourselves, I'm sure.
Attorney Jaber, I know I see a large crowd of people here. I don't know, have you had a chance to meet with them at all, informally or formally? Or? I mean, I know you've in the past have sometimes met with people. You know how our procedure works. I don't know if that's something you would be open to, say, after this meeting. Because, again, I'm going to probably give about a half hour for the public to comment on this. Again, the applicant doesn't have to, but sometimes there's questions that come up that may not even be privy to this committee that you might concerns have with the project, and it might be easier to put the two parties together in an informal meeting in maybe one of the conference rooms that are available. But if that's okay, unless you have any other comment right now, or again, this public hearing will be open to the next meeting, and it's always something that can be brought up the next time. Commissioner Mills, did you want to? Oh, okay, Commissioner Mills does still have a question, so please. Commissioner Mills.
Mr. Sullivan. Do we have cuts and fills of 5 feet or more? Yes. Okay, we have that. Will you submit a blasting plan when you, some sort of a blasting plan?
I've submitted a cut and fill analysis that lot by lot and road is the quantities of cut material and fill material.
The tonnage or what?
Cubic yardage.
Cubic yards, okay.
And Mr. Von Rosenving has submitted his report. Attached to that report is the specification on how to conduct the blasting plan, if that's correct, Ted. I think that's what you're looking for. I guess take a look at it and let me know if you need something else.
Possibly, as the chairman had stated, we would like to do a sidewalk. Is it possible to have the 14 cluster houses staked?
They are staked.
They are staked. And have you given consideration as far as impervious surface? Can some of the driveways be pavers, grass pavers?
I think you could probably do some of the up top around the house. The flatter portions can be pervious pavement, but the other ones, based on the grades, it'd be better to have them as paved surfaces.
So the pavers would be up at the top, and the impervious surface would be down on the grades.
Correct.
Okay. If you can...
We'll look into that. Yeah.
That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments, commissioners? Okay. I see in the audience we have Larry Marucci of the Kenwood Lake Authority. So on my privy, I'm going to allow him to speak. Any comments, and commissioners are feel free to questions. Excuse me, Larry Marsicano. Thank you. And I'll let you identify yourself too, Larry, if you could, in your organization.
Larry Marsicano. I'm the director of the Kenwood Lake Authority. You sign this too? I hope.
Please, if you could,
okay.
For the record.
The site was pretty well described. I have not been at the site myself. When there is a site like this, a subdivision that on close proximity to a lake, the Lake Authority is always quite interested in that. In general, we are always interested when the potential wetlands can be impacted and when there is a lot of drainage that could be going to the lake. Mr. Cowan described some of the environmental values of it. You know, we have particular interest in that property or in that general area. It provides a unique area as the lake goes. At least from the water, it's one of the few few areas where there's actually mature pines, a stand of mature pines, at least from the water. I don't know how far they go up, but only from the water. I know Mr. Baruti, in a recent visit, had the pleasure of having 2 bald eagles fly out of the area on a visit by water in the summertime, which is quite unique. We're used to seeing those animals in the wintertime, but it's only been recently that we've seen these now in the summertime. And those kinds of areas, I think, are particularly of value to them. The pines have a tendency to sometimes reach out. So just a few notes for consideration. If you look at the DEP's Natural Diversity Database maps, you'll note now that the entire lake is now mapped, not just areas close by, but the entire lake. I think there's about 6 different species. I think the folks from the DEP will tell you live within the close proximity of the lake. Because of our interest, we retained Trinkus Engineering to review the site plan, which he did. I will not go over the details in that at this point, but wanted to let you know we did that. And I provided to you as well as to CCA and to Steve as well. We also, I don't believe the other site plan is part of this public hearing, the one on the water, but we had him review that as well, and we've passed along that as well. Just a couple of other things. We would ask that if it's okay, that we'd like to participate in the site walk if we could, and if it's okay, I'd like to bring with me Sean Hayden from the Northwest Conservation District. I am not an engineer, nor am I even a class away from being an engineer. I rely on those folks for support. So if that's okay with the folks, I would.
That's a question. Dan, is there any objection to having Larry and/or? So that's a yes. It'd be the property
Right.
owner okaying it, the applicant, and again, just having.
We do greatly appreciate a number of the measures in the plan. For instance, the open space area now on the lake. We would certainly promote that as a model for other site plans on the lake throughout the 5 towns. But again, because of its close proximity, the steepness of the slope, we did want to provide you a kind of a third-party kind of review. So.
As far as our extra expert, Steve Danzer, has he had a chance to look at this, or is this something we can have him look at it?
He's going to look at it. He did a quick drive-through, and he's going back next week to do a field visit, and then he'll generate a report.
Possibly for our next meeting on October 10th? Okay. So at this time, you want to make one comment? Oh, sure, go ahead.
Just to clarify, Larry had mentioned about the bald eagles. This development, the closest activity is a house on lot 7 that's over 500 feet off the lake, the shore of Candlewood Lake. And based on our environmental or our biologists, those bald eagles tend to nest right along the shores. So it's our opinion there won't be any impacts from this development on the bald eagles. But we are aware that it's in the Natural Diversity Database. And again, there's only one house that's just over 500 feet from the shore of the lake. Everything else is further away from there.
As far as the site walk, though, would maybe this is more to Attorney Jaber or Attorney Beecher, would that be okay that Larry and I believe Steve Hayden would accompany us? Sean Hayden, excuse me. Okay, so could you confirm it back through Pat and then Pat? Let him know directly. Okay, great, if you could. Okay.
Can I just also
Sure.
make a comment on the natural
Just
diversity?
identify yourself for the record one more time.
James Cowan. Our report does address the natural diversity database. We, as environmental professionals, did consult with DEP on what potential species would be in that vicinity. The 2 species, the bald eagle and bog turtle, were the two species that DEP was concerned about, and we've looked at the habitat. There is no bog turtle habitat on our site. And as Steve has pointed out, DEP's recommendations for protecting bald eagle habitat is 500 feet from potential nest sites, which would be right along the shoreline. And so as Steve has mentioned, we don't anticipate any impact. We're complying with DEP's recommendations for bald eagle protection.
All right, at this time, I'd like to open it up to the public for make comment. The only one thing I'd say, I'm going to give us about a half-hour time limit. Once again, we will...
Sign it again, or just the one time? 51 Bear Mountain Road, Henry Erickson. What I'm mainly concerned about in the print that he has here is he said that there's a ridge line right through here, approximately. Well, I live right here at 51 Bear Mountain Road, and Mr. Bruner lives right here. And every time it rains, Mr. Bruner gets water off the side hill right down to his house and in his cellar. And what I'm worried about, if all these houses have septic systems, sooner or later, because this mountain is a rock pile. I don't care, I don't have the education that you have, but I walk there, I live there, there's deer there, there's turkeys there, and I'm afraid that the sewage systems, if families, you know, we've got 3 or 4 kids, eventually that's going to end up in the lake. And if it doesn't end up in the lake and it goes on the west side of this ridge line, it's going to destroy my well. So I'm against the proposal. I think that if you want to put houses there, you should put city water and city sewage. And I think there's an awful lot of people sitting in this room that'll agree with me. Thank you.
Okay, whoa. Okay, you have to come up once at a time and you make comments. There's no show of hands or anything else. That's all we ask. Thank you. And again, if you could sign in, you let's give your address too. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Jerry Brunner. I'm on 63 Bear Mountain, and I have a few issues here with what was discussed earlier when we talked about wetlands. And Mr. Erickson just pointed out that in any heavy rainstorm, and there's a berm behind my house, that was mentioned earlier, okay? And there's a flat spot on top. That's where the sand was taken over the gravel to build the road to go down the lake. So that is a wet spot, and it's not a small one as it shows there on that map, the green of that beautiful colored map there. It is an issue. As long as we got some trees, perhaps it is no bigger issue than it is now. But the question I also have is, are we going to remove the trees that go all the way onto Bear Mountain Road on lot number 1, which is Family Equities? Okay, if that's the case, we're going to have a real problem. Also, all the water that is rainwater and water that comes from the houses, drainage from the roof goes into the storm drain. And if we unload more water into those storm drains, we're going to have another problem. Because if it rains, that water runs down the road in front of my house all the way down to Buckskin. And so wetlands and is definitely a problem. The other issue I have is wildlife. We have a lot of wildlife, not as was said earlier. We have deers, we have bald eagles, I never see any, but we have rabbits, we got squirrels, we got turkey, we got, you name it, coyote, fox, we got it up there, and it's also because of part of Bear Mountain Park, I believe. So it has been cited. Naturally, you got to live up there in order to cite it. If you just go up there one day out of the year, you may not see anything. Like you say, I live there, and bald eagles I never seen. Traffic problem you don't want to discuss. There was a word earlier that somebody said on the vortex system. Can you fill me in on what that is? Anybody?
Well, again, I think that's something that can be done outside. We know what it
Okay,
is. It's
whatever.
a filtration system that actually
Okay.
cleans the water. Basically, if you Google it or anything else for technics, you can
Yeah.
actually read some pretty interesting stuff. Again, all these plans are on file, and
There was a fellow named Matushi. He was going to buy, or actually purchased, property behind John and the
okay, the only thing I'm going to
People
direct you a
on
little bit more, if it has to direct to this application, this
This
land.
has-
Mr. Martucci's, I believe, is farther down the road, and it's
yeah,
not part of
but
this application.
there's a real problem with water. I
Okay.
guess that's really the holdup of the whole thing.
All right, and again, this is not part of, unfortunately, part of this application. We're only concerned with this lot at this time. That's something you can take up with the city engineers or planning, but not a part of this hearing.
Well, okay, the 47 acres, which I guess there was a proposal to give it to the city. Well, that thing isn't worth a damn.
Okay, again, we're talking about,
Because you
An
got a
applicant that's coming-
45-degree incline.
okay,
Nobody's going to build anything on that rock. So if the issue is here, maybe we can make a better deal, by taking those 47 acres and give it to the city, forget it.
okay.
I have some more, but I think we'll,
All right, you'll have plenty of time to talk in next meeting, too.
no, you were particularly involved with wetlands, right? And,
This is part of this commission. Again, planning is going to talk about traffic. There's possibly other public hearings that follows this. Mainly, we're concerned about the wetlands. We can send the runoff, which is good, but again, only particular to this piece of property.
Now, this piece of property is called 3069, right?
I
That's the number. You
believe,
got the letter.
maybe I can get a clarification, Mr. Sullivan?
3069. That's on here on the letter you gave me. Yeah, but the property itself is 3069. Oh, okay. Okay, the assessor's lot number. Good. So that's like the street number then, 6567. Just about a few days ago, maybe a week ago, I'm not sure, but I'm always around, there was a new stake maybe 50 feet away from my property, and that has a number of 3259.
Again,
How does that fit into with 3069 or 3059?
okay, Mr. Sullivan, from the applicant?
Yeah, with a red flag.
That was a survey stake, surveyor staked out certain parts of the property.
Now,
So
my
he-
question is, how far, there's a stake, now that's your property, and the end of your property, right?
That stake is probably not the property line, no. It's probably like a house corner or something like that. Well, I'll check it.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, this is something that could possibly be done after the meeting, again, with the correct meetings. Okay, and then again, the applicant's saying they're more than happy to meet with you after this. There's some questions that could be answered at that time.
How close, the
Sure.
family equities comes to my property.
Okay, and again, it possibly something after the meeting, it doesn't, again, deal with
Okay.
what we're looking at tonight, and to kind of move the meeting along. But we do appreciate Jerry coming up and coming out tonight, and hopefully we'll see you next meeting. How you doing? Come on up. If you could, again, just sign in. Yeah, excuse me. Again, this is a panel. Okay, thank you. And let me just reiterate that too. Excuse me one second. Again, we can't be approached by the public. Again, we're sitting on a panel, almost like a judgment. Again, please don't call the commissioners at home, comments, because again, we're going to have to politely tell you that we cannot make any conversation with you about it or talk about it. And again, it's to be fairness to the applicant and also be the fairness to you. Thank you.
My name is Victor Westman. I'm a resident of Bear Mountain Road, number 52. I'm across the road from all this future destruction of our environment. I want to say one thing, that this property up here, I've known it all my life, and I've gone for 77 years old, so it isn't that I'm not qualified with who owned it and all about about what was going on with the land. It's unique property. It's probably one of the most gorgeous pieces of property in this whole state of Connecticut. And to see any of it destroyed is absolutely criminal. But the money talks. And of course, if somebody owns the property and they want to do something with it, as long as it's legal, what can you do? All I can say is it's a damn shame to see any of it destroyed. However, if they are going to build on it, there are places that you can build on it, and there are places that are suitable as long as it's done right. Now, of course, you'll have roads and everything else, and blasting and everything else in that property, and anyone who is interested in walking that property, of course, we might be trespassing on it, but if we could get permission from the owner, I could take any of you people up there and show you all the basic parts of the property which you might be interested in. It's been logged over about a year or so ago. They made a hell of a mess of it. Lots of places, they don't tell you about this stuff. There's places where the trucks pulled out, where they pulled the logs out. There's a lot of erosion, a lot of logs that never were taken out because they couldn't get them out of there. A lot of destruction of trees and almost like a clear cut in some places. But otherwise, but the property, that'll all come back. Trees grow. But when you put houses in, and you put roads in, and septics and deep wells that dry up everybody else's well, and you know this is all going to be wells that they're going to be deep because that's high country up there, and these wells are not going to be 50 or 60 feet deep. They're going to be 400 and 500 feet deep. And and people from the city don't realize that water sometimes it comes to an end. You have to use your head when you live in the country, because I've been through it. I know what it is when you run out of water, and I know what the farmers around there went through when they ran out of water. And right now we're having a dry spell, and we don't know when we're going to get any more rain. We could not maybe get much more water now for another 3 or 4 months. And like people like Jerry Bruner, who lives right near the edge of this property, will be adversely affected. I mean, it'll be a very negative because they'll cut the trees all down because of the maps that I've seen of it. There's no way you can do anything with it without cutting the trees down. You can't put septic systems in, you can't put water retention systems in, you can't put foundations in, and you can't build driveways and everything else without cutting your trees down. You can't build on top of the trees because I don't think they allow it in Danbury. Not yet, anyway. But anyway, this is about what I'd like to say about it, and it's just my opinion that I think that most of the people in this here that are involved in anywhere, the Conservation Commission or any environmental, would probably partially at least agree with me. Incidentally, I am a member of the Land Trust in Danbury, and I have made arrangements to. I have a number of acres across the road from this, and someday I'm going to be dead and gone, and I'll be up in the cemetery if there's one left up there for me. And I would like to see that my land is never built on, that it would become part of a land trust. Now, if this becomes a mess across the road, I'm going to say, what the hell am I going to stay here for? I might as well go up in Vermont somewhere and get out of there and sell it off, and then we'll have another mess. So it's almost like, what do you want to do? Do you want to keep it nice or keep the other people? It will keep us all happy. So in other words, this is something that's just to consider and to talk about. And if you want to take a walk, you can come up and I'll be able to talk with you. So anyway, thanks a lot for all your time, and
and we'll be in touch with you.
And just to bring your point home too, legally, we're doing site walks. Again, it would be trespassing, so we don't want to encourage that by the public. But again, we're setting up arrangements to do it legally, to bring experts out there to walk it. Again, that's what on our part, to do a thorough investigation, to look at the property and your claims. So, thank you for coming in.
Good evening, panel and ladies and gentlemen. First, want to thank the city of Danbury for...
Excuse me one second. Could you just identify yourself and where you live? That's all we
Yes,
ask.
my name is Charles Laverne Churchill Vandermark Hutchins, and I'm Embassy Builders. I'm licensed and insured in the state of Connecticut. Hutchins, H-U-T-C-H-I-N-S. And I was not a licensed contractor at the time, but I built homes up on Bear Mountain. That's a beautiful site. And I admire people who admire beautiful sites. But I'm also a past member of the Loyal Order of the Moose Lodge up on Boulevard Avenue, and I want to thank the city for its foresight and assistance in providing sewer and water up there. We had some very serious problems on Lake Kenosha with leaching. We built the septic system, I think, twice up there. Craftsman Construction was heavily involved in that. But until the sewer was put in, we really couldn't contain the problem that we grandfathered. And there's nothing wrong with development as long as it's sensible and responsible. And I think we ought to consider being supporters of the citizenry who desire a responsible approach to development. There's nothing wrong with development as long as it's done responsibly, aesthetically. There's limitations. You know, I studied agricultural engineering and soil technology when I got my degree in agriculture. I'm a farmer at heart, a dairy farmer. But I hike those open spaces up there. They're dear to my heart. When I need a little time off to meditate and think about what I'm doing, I go up top of Bear Mountain. They've got a nice little airport tower up there that keeps our planes flying straight and narrow into the airport. And it's a nice place. My lawyer likes to keep his office there in Lee Farm because he likes the airplanes. It's a nice area, and the airplanes really don't pollute. They're a bit of admiration of us airplane fans, the way they take off and land. You know.
I'm sorry, Charles, do you live on Bear Mountain Road, or?
No, I live presently at 11 Spring Street.
Okay.
I'm temporarily there.
Well, we're just trying to keep you narrowed down to comments about...
34 years in Danbury. I have 2 degrees from Western, the last one magna cum laude, Citizenship Award, who's who in American colleges and universities. And
we're just trying to keep your comments directed towards this development on that area. And
but I would support that development, but only if it was done responsibly. And I would encourage the expansion of the sewer and the water in the city of Danbury where it is necessary. And we have shallow land up there. We have, it's a terminal moraine, I think. The soil is very shallow up there, and it must be treated with a lot of respect. And trees, as many as you can keep in there or replant, would be nice. But definitely sewer and water have to be expanded. It's expensive, but it's more expensive down the road for the generations to come if we don't take responsibility for the problems now. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, panel.
thank you. Unless any commissioners have any questions? Okay.
My name is Raymond Brockfeld, and I live at 55 Bear Mountain Road.
You could sign in on the sheet in front of you?
Get to that. I just this afternoon got a chance to peruse the package that was submitted, and I find that the inventory of wildlife is totally incomplete. I don't think they really did anything but peripheral examination. They mention the slippery salamander, and it's very offhanded. They don't have any real results of any kind of evaluation or search. I would also like to ask that the state please come in and verify their very sparse evaluation of the wildlife. They also have nothing as far as vegetation is concerned. What native species there are there any that are endangered? All that is lacking. And I have one other question. How ignoring the zoning by putting houses on plots that are 25 to 50% smaller than the zoning calls for, and putting all that well digging and storage within that compact area, how that is offset by the fact they're going to cut down less trees, which are renewable. They're renewable. Yeah, at this point, that's all I have to say.
Commissioners have any questions? Thank you for coming out. Are you done? If that microphone's too high, you could angle it down too.
Okay, my name is Ophir de Barros. I live in 1 Buckskin Heights Drive, close to these guys. And my concern is about the draining system, because now we have in Bear Mountain Road a big problem. This year in June, my yard was covered with water, because all the water that comes from Bear Mountain Road, eastbound and westbound, comes to a catch basin just in front of my lot, okay? And there's a pipe that go under my lot, is an easement from the city of Danbury, and go to a little stream, then to the lake. And this pipe is not enough now, today, to receive all the waters that came from these two sides of the Bear Mountain Road. My lot is the lowest part of the road, at the part, and also from Buckskin Heights Drive, all the waters that come, the three parts, they converge to this catch basin just in my lot. And in June, the pipe was not enough to receive all the waters. There was a big storm, and it overflowed over the yard. I'm working with the city so they can fix this. My concern is this project, this development, will worsen the situation, because a lot of water will be put in the Bear Mountain system, the water system, down to the catch basin just in front of my home. So I would like to see studies that could prevent that and be assured that the situation my home will not be worse than that. In Floyd hurricane, I got my basement flooded because of that. And then I put a bump just in the front of the driveway to avoid the waters go. But the city paved it again, the street and raised again. So we have a problem now. And if we do this development, this problem, without all this care, I believe the situation will be worse. So before any approval, the city must see how to treat these waters. Okay? That's my concern.
Thank you. Anybody would like to speak for or against this application? Probably got about another 7 or 8 minutes. Again, we will have a public hearing next meeting on October 10th. Anybody again would like to speak for or against this application? Final call? Okay. And so again, we will have another meeting. We're going to continue this public hearing to October 10th, 2007. It's a Wednesday night. It's always the second Wednesday in October. Unless any of the commissioners have any final questions or comments?
Unless there was a comment from Dan or a comment from the applicant.
Dan or the applicant had one final comment about anything that was discussed tonight, like a little rebuttal or anything, or? Yeah, Attorney Jaber, I'm sorry? Okay, so that, again, this is a great, the Attorney Jaber is going to allow you to meet with him. He might be able to answer some of the questions for you, and we do appreciate the applicant doing that with a better understanding of this project. And again, any questions you have from that you don't feel got answered can always be brought up at our next meeting.
I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing to the next regular scheduled EIC meeting.
Okay, we have a motion to continue regular activity number 768. Excuse me one second, I got a motion on the floor. 768 to our next regular scheduled meeting on October 10th by Commissioner Fagan and Commissioner Jessica Siriano. Seconded by Siriano. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, passes, goes on next.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name's Tom Beecher, and along with my law partner, Paul Jaber, who's here tonight, we represent Pamela Equities Corporation, which is the owner applicant for this particular project. The application is for approval of a 14-lot cluster subdivision on 119 acres. 45 of those acres would be dedicated open space. Also here with me tonight on behalf of the applicant are Steve Sullivan, professional engineer with CCA LLC, James Cowan, wetland scientist, and soil scientist with Environmental Planning Services, and Ted Von Rosenvinge, who's also a professional engineer with Geodesign, Inc. We're not going to take a lot of time tonight, I don't believe. Dr. Michael Clemens, who I reported to you last time, who's a herpetologist, did do his field review, but we don't yet have a report from him to present to you. His report may have some suggestions on what we might want to do in terms of some refinements for this project. In addition, we may want to make adjustments to the plans based on the input from the Candlewood Lake Authority's consultants, one of which was Mr. Trinkus, but we're anticipating that perhaps Sean Hayden, who went on the site visit, may also be submitting some suggestions. This afternoon, we saw Dr. Danzer's report for the first time. A couple of things about Dr. Danzer's report. He references some on-site activity which concerned him. The only activity that we're aware of is that there was a forestry and logging permit which was issued by this commission on June 23, 2004, under Regulated Activities Application 554. There was activity, therefore, pursuant to that permit that was approved by this commission. There also was some activity associated with the demolition of 2 cottages on the property pursuant to permits issued by the city of Danbury. And obviously, there may have been also some activity related to perk testing. In addition, Mr. Danzer somewhat takes us to task for not having appropriate wetland resource and habitat information in our application. We're concerned that the Wetland Resource and Wildlife Habitat Report, which was fairly lengthy, that was prepared by Jim Cowan's firm, Environmental Planning Services, was not submitted to Mr. Danzer for his review prior to his issuing his report. So we would hope that that report that I'm speaking of, the September report by Mr. Cowan's firm, would be submitted rather quickly to Mr. Danzer so that perhaps he can supplement his report that you received today after he has a chance to actually review the information that we did provide with the application, if that would please the commission. So therefore, we will anticipate receiving perhaps some refined comments from Dr. Danzer as well as others, so we expect, rather than do this piecemeal and come in and say, well, we can do this, we can do that, we don't want to do that, you don't want to do that, we don't want to waste the time. On another note, as suggested by Mr. Lees at the last meeting, we did have a meeting with the neighbors after the portion of the public hearing on this application, and the consultants discussed and explained some of the issues that some of the neighbors had. I can't tell you that we solved all their problems, but I think it was a productive meeting, including a discussion of the concerns that a lot of the neighbors had about drainage from the site impacting and worsening the city drainage system as it impacted down the road. And we attempted to explain the idea behind the zero net increase in peak storm runoff from the property to them. In other words, there will not be anything more flowing into that city storm system than comes off the site today. There were a few other issues that aren't EIC issues that we also addressed, but I just wanted you to know that we took that suggestion seriously, and hopefully it helped out. Jim Cowan is here tonight, and he will address the report that he did submit, which is a little more than bullet points, but on the proposed mitigation on the site as well as a planting plan. So with that, I'll have Jim address you.
For the record, my name is James Cowan. I'm a registered soil scientist and professional wetland scientist with Environmental Planning Services. At the public hearing last meeting, the topic of mitigation came up, and I have provided a proposed mitigation plan in the form of a letter in response to the questions and requests. As I stated last time, so I believe you have my October 5th letter. And as I had stated from our report, in the planning process, we see a primary form of mitigation, avoidance and minimization of impact. And by the cluster subdivision approach, we were able to minimize overall impacts on the site. So again, I just wanted to say that for the record, that reduces the overall impacts, and we see that as a major component of mitigation. I know the commission is concerned about actual activities of mitigation for the filling, proposed filling of the small isolated wetland identified as wetland 1 in our report. And so we are proposing two types of activities. The first is removal of invasive non-native species in wetland 2, which is the main wetland on the site. It has pretty high ecological integrity, though it is crossed. There is a road crossing for the existing road down to the lake and residences down below. There are some invasive species, so we would propose the removal of woody invasive species that would be identified by a professional like myself and tagged for removal and eradication. And any invasive plant material would be disposed of off-site so that it couldn't reroot or seeds get further dispersed into the wetlands. The second form of mitigation would be wetland buffer plantings. And I've looked at the site plan, and for the proposed driveway for lot 6 and 7, there is a retaining wall relatively close to the wetland, and I would propose a buffer planting of native trees and shrubs below that wall, between the wall and the wetland. And also there are several pipes that would go under the road to carry runoff from down towards the wetland. And there would have to be some clearing on that slope to get those pipes in. And so I also propose to have some mitigation plantings to restore those areas. And those, as we discussed last time, it was deemed that a letter would be sufficient for that activity, those activities. So I have, rather than do a detailed planting plan, my recommendation is that the plants would be field located, and in reality, that's typically the best way because of the boulders and so forth. We actually locate the plants where most appropriate based on the field conditions at the time. So rather than do a planting plan per se, I got from CCA the areas of disturbance, how many square feet, and the length of those areas, and came up with a density count of for linear feet. And I put in an average of trees for about 20 foot on center, and then a spacing of shrubs average about 6 foot on center in staggered rows. But again, it's to be a randomized, naturalized planting and not rows, because it does extend in a wooded area. So you'll see on the second page I have a plant list of quantity and the quantity, and I have numbers for the retaining wall is the first column, and the second column is for the pipes, and then I identify the size and container plants, the trees 4 to 6 feet, and the shrubs 2 to 3 feet. And then some Virginia creeper, which is an excellent vine and ground cover. It's adaptable to dry conditions as well as wet conditions, so that would provide further stabilization. And then a seed mix with native conservation wildlife seed mix. So you can see there's quite a diversity of trees and shrubs. Some are more adapted to the wetland condition at the lower slope, and others are very adapted to dry conditions like the witch hazel and hazelnut. And others have a wide range. They can tolerate both wet and dry conditions. So provided a diversity of native. And all of the species on the list are native to Danbury.
That's all we intend to present tonight in terms of new information. Mr. Sullivan is here, Mr. Von Rosenvinge is here. I know that some commissioners went on a site walk yesterday. If there's any questions fresh in your mind that you might want to raise with us tonight, that'd be great. But
Commissioner Lee.
I was just going to quote on the plan, though. I think, as we go forward, I think we'd want something in a more formal plan of plantings, and something that would be bonded out, too, for like 2 or 3 years. That's what we do in most cases, again, with planting. So, I know I appreciate the list you did for it. I think it was on my request. But again, something a more formal plan as we go forward, and again, something to consider that we had it bonded out too. Again, just make sure the plans. Dan, maybe you can help me. Was it 2, 3, or 4 years?
3 years.
3 years. So, with the mitigation. Because again, if they die after the first year, what goes? We
Right.
make sure at least 3 years and maintain. So,
okay.
thank you.
Commissioner Mills. There were just a couple things. I'm glad you're going to go through Trinkus Engineering along with the Danzer's report, because I had a lot of questions referring to what Mr. Trinkus brought up.
Mr. Sullivan's ultimately going to address a number of issues in there, but if you want to, if there's highlight some, that would be terrific.
Well, I was starting on page 1 with the compliance with EIC regulations, but since you're going to, go through that and give a more formal presentation and clarification next meeting, I think that should suffice. 2 questions right off the top of my head. I believe there we're due an endangered species report during a field walk yesterday, bog turtles, and I don't know if that was forwarded to the health department or not. And the other thing pertaining to removing the invasive weeds along the wetlands, I would also ask you to consider taking all the trees that have been felled along that area. It's quite a bit to clean that up. I mean, they're cutting across. I mean, when we did the site walk yesterday, I was wondering if you'd take that into consideration too. I think it would enhance I know it would enhance the property by getting all those trees out that have been felled for, I don't know for what reason.
For the record, Steve Sullivan from CCA LLC. Bill, to answer your first question, the environmental report by Environmental Planning Services that we submitted back in September addresses the DEP Natural Diversity Database. Also, as a result of yesterday, I faxed to Danbury today the 2 letters from DEP.
Thank you. If you just consider that, that's all.
As to the felled trees, we'll certainly take a look at that and incorporate a response as
That
well.
would enhance the property, really would. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any further questions?
Are we going to discuss Mr. Danzer's report, or, because I wasn't on the sidewalk, I'm sorry that I missed it.
Okay.
We're going to wait till the next meeting so they can...
Going to wait till the next meeting, yes.
Okay.
Can I just ask whether it's likely that you will submit our report that wasn't submitted to Mr. Danzer to Mr. Danzer so that we can have him supplement?
Yeah.
We sent the
That's
package to him before that.
We need more copies of it. The applicant just gave it. We'll make sure that he gets it.
Thank you.
And if we're still Mr. Danzer's letter, I was more concerned about the erosion that's happening right now. And if we're going to issue an LOB, or is that going to come later in the meeting? I mean, that's what I'm talking about the site right now. I did not go on the sidewalk, but I mean, Stephen Danzer is reporting back to us, there's signs of erosion from the tree cutting. I mean, what are we doing right now to prevent further erosion? That's what my concerns are.
Well, we're looking into that. We're going to look into that, yeah. Well, we just got the report
We got a
today.
proposal in front of us, we have obviously a violation. I mean,
I'm not saying it's a violation. I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen where he's talking about where the erosion's occurring. So that's what-
I personally, I think the commission would like to see something done about it by the time we meet the next time.
I think some of this might have happened with the logging permit. They were issued a logging permit, and I think we tore it up when they were doing
But I
it.
think there's a wrong done right now, let's correct that right.
Oh, yeah,
So we have to really take more actions.
Yep.
than an LD
right. Yeah, we'll definitely look into it before the next meeting and get
Silt fence along the edge.
a solution for that, yeah.
Well, I haven't personally seen it. We did discuss it before coming into the hearing, and depending on the extent of it, we discussed making that part of the additions to the mitigation plan, essentially to clean it up. So unless there's a staff recommendation that there's something imminent happening out there, we'd like to approach it that way.
Okay, I mean, if that's okay with staff, that's good.
Yep. For the record, Dan Baruti. I did observe the erosion, and also Dr. Danzer, who is a part-time employee of our agency, and he's advising that a NOV or a cease and desist is to be issued, and really it's up to the commission to discuss it and decide whether if you're going to direct staff to do an enforcement or work with the applicant to put it into their mitigation plan, or to go out there and...
What I'm looking for is some siltation fence, some hay bales, something to prevent further erosion that could be put out very simply in a day's work, or are you saying it has to be incorporated into a larger plan? That's the answer I'm looking for, because I wasn't out there, and I have to look to you as an expert to tell me, which of those two scenarios do you think it is? Is it some siltation fencing with some hay bales, or is it a whole design plan?
Well, it's a result of the logging and the test hole activity, and you know, it's a matter of judgment whether it's severe erosion. Danzer is one of our experts, and some of what I saw would constitute, if we saw it on another property, reason to write a notice of violation, or at least contact the owner and ask him to work with us to put up some silt fence.
That's what I think
No,
you should do.
and,
I think
It's up to the commission to let me know what you want to do. If you want to fire off a violation, or would you rather we work with the applicant to clean it up?
Problem solved, look well.
Okay.
I just,
We had similar in previous cases where we went out and we saw material dumped on the land and the applicant removed it, although we did give them orders in that case, but
even when we
it's
mentioned...
really up to the commission.
I don't think we should issue an NOV. I think even when we discussed it yesterday with Steve, he was willing to cooperate with us on this. I think this should just work through you.
Okay.
Get something done as soon as we can.
We'll have a meeting and we'll discuss the, you know, what would have to be done for erosion control.
I mean, something that could be implemented fast too, because again, we're gonna get into some type of rainy season.
Right.
We've had such a dry spell, and again, I wouldn't say flash floods, but again, the soil will travel because it's so dry, that if something could be, put in place within the next 2 weeks, that would, go a far distance from my opinion.
Okay, and then one other thing, there's no activity going on there now. I mean, this was caused by the logging, which was permitted, and also the test hole work, which is exempt from permit under our regulation. And it's really a judgment call of whether, they stepped over the bounds when they were testing and it got into the wetland, felled trees, or made such a mess that they caused erosion. That was something that the commission didn't foresee when they gave them permission to log, or when we wrote the regulation exempting land testing as a regulated activity.
I think you should just try to work with them, Dan.
Okay.
We saw it yesterday. I mean, I think that's sufficient. Any further questions? Any of the commissioners? You all done? You're all through? Okay. Anyone from the public wishing to speak on this petition? Anyone from the public wishing to speak on this petition?
I have one question. Yes, if I may. There's a gentleman here at the last meeting that brought up, and I don't know whether or not it pertains, whether it adjoins your property or not. He lives on Buckskin Heights Drive. He complained about how his cellar is always flooded and working with the city. I don't know if you got a chance to talk to that gentleman after the last meeting, if you're able to put his fears to rest, or whether you're just not...
We did. He was one of the gentlemen that did come in and speak with us after the public hearing portion. His concern, I think, was more akin to the fear of more flow going into the city system and getting down to
Catch basin just in front of his house.
Buckskin is down the road a little bit further. And so we discussed with him the fact that the flow will not increase into the city system from this project. So
Thank you. Thank you. He came and he had a concern. I was hoping that you would address it. Thank you.
No one else in the public wishes to speak. I'll entertain a motion to continue this.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to continue the public hearing for regulated activity, 768, 65-67 Bear Mountain Road, for our next regular scheduled meeting on October 24th, 2007.
I'll second it.
Motion made and second to continue to 10/24/07, regulated activity 768. Any remarks? All those in favor, vote the usual way.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Mr. Mills. Thank you, gentlemen.